I see on the screen. I want to, of course, first greet His Excellency, Mr. President, Mr. Sefik Dzaferovic, who's been here with us with a special address in relation with what is the topic of today's session, and which has been in continuation being on the top of agenda of Nizami Ganjavi International Center. Of course, I want to say for the record that Mr. Dzaferovic is a long-lasting friend of Nizami Ganjavi International Center. When he was Speaker of the Parliament before he got elected in a presidency, he was also being present in Baku Forum, and he was hosting us twice in Sarajevo in the capacity first of the President of the Parliament, and then he hosted us a year and a half ago as a head of the state in his office when our delegation, Nizami Ganjavi, Secretary General Roshan, and myself, some of our friends, members of the board, Kerry Kennedy, our distinguished member of Nizami Ganjavi Board of Trustees, when we were visiting him in his office. And after that, Mr. Dzaferovic was not hesitating to be every time when he was available, when he could make it in his busy schedule, to be with us in some other places. And the last, probably one of the most memorable one, as far as I'm concerned, was the last meeting where we had an audience with Pope Francis. Pope Francis, where President Dzaferovic was with us as a part of NGIC delegation, having in mind that we had one event in Rome at that moment. Of course, it was, and Mr. Dzaferovic is coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina, which I happen to be very proud of, as a member of the presidency, sitting in Sarajevo, sharing the same space with me just across the street. And since I mentioned Pope Francis, as a person who was, who actually all his political life tried to follow the spirit of what we want to promote as Nizami Ganjavi International Center, and what Pope Francis, when he was in Sarajevo, told us that he's very happy finally to be in European Jerusalem. So here I'm sitting in European Jerusalem with President Dzaferovic and greeting all of you in 3 continents for the beginning. First, I want to thank you, Susan, for you being with us in here. Susan Elliott is the distinguished president of our partner institute, National Committee for American Foreign Policy. And Susan was, I hope she won't mind if I say 2 things about Susan. First thing, I mean, she was in Dayton. She was in Christopher team and Secretary of State Christopher in his team. And Susan knows very much about what is happening in this part of the world. That is the reason why I'm very thankful. And I want President Dzaferovic also to be aware of that with the National Committee for American Foreign Policy, my foundation, Shared Society and Values, and of course, Nizami Ganjavi International Center, we are right now in the process of one very interesting series of debates devoted to the future of Western Balkan after we assess what is going on. And Susan was not only chairing our 3 meetings, official meetings that we had so far, most of them closed ones, in which we were putting together people from Euro-Atlantic space and people from the region, people from European Union, people from the United States, who are well aware of what is going on in the region, in order to try, and hopefully that thanks to Susan and her activities and people with the NCFP, we will be able to send our conclusions, our policy recommendations to the new administration at certain level, since Balkan and Bosnia and Herzegovina is again becoming an issue. President Nishani, I want to thank you for participating. President Nishani, you were with us as a president, and now you are here with us as a Nizami Ganjavi NGIC member. And thank you very much for your participation in our forum today. And of course, Abdulaziz Al-Fajiri, long friend, a member of NGIC, but friend who we hosted here in Sarajevo as a Secretary General of ISESCO. Or when I want to explain to ignorant Westerners, instead of saying ISESCO and explaining to them, I said, well, this is Muslim UNESCO, okay? So this is Muslim World UNESCO. And Mr. Al-Tajiri was very, very helpful, especially in communication also with President Dzaferovic some years ago. We were trying to put Bosnian tombstones, stečak, as a heritage, cultural heritage under umbrella of UNESCO and ISESCO, and Mr. Al-Tajiri was very, very helpful in those endeavors. And of course, Steven Spielberg is with us again, Roshan Muradov, our master director, producer, and the spirit behind our events. Without further saying more words, Mr. Dzaferovic, thank you very much for being ready, being with us. And of course, we are today also, we would like to, on the end of our gathering, to share with you electronically, and hopefully very soon we'll physically be able to present you with an award that Mr. Muradov, Secretary General, is going to master that part of our event. So Roshan, you would like to? Thank you.
We have also President Zatlers.
Oh, I don't see him. I'm sorry. I don't see President Zatlers on my screen.
And Schwab is also
invisible. Oh, I have, oh, Valdis, Valdis, everything, it's my fault. It's my fault. See, I said that Roshan is Spielberg, and I mean, he proved it by directing me, don't go out of the screen and don't go out of the script. I know that Valdis, you were supposed to be here, but unfortunately, as a computer scientist, I didn't. And now I see you very well, and I see you in a good spirit. So thank you very much. And Valdis is, of course, one of the most prominent persons, not only of our board of trustees, and President Zatlers is maybe, as far as I'm concerned, out of us from board of Nizami Ganjavi, one of the most credible persons to speak about the topic our today's gathering, multilateralism and search for better mechanisms of running this place called Little Blue Planet. So Valdis, thank you very much. And of course, I hear in here, I see we have some friends and colleagues from NCAFP who are with us today. Mr. Schwab and Mr. John Conorton. I want to greet you from European Jerusalem, from Sarajevo, and I assume you are in New York or someplace in the States. Hope you're all doing fine. And I want to thank you already for your participation in our common endeavors to try to find way forward for Western Balkan under Susan leadership. And she was so kind to attract you to be part of our Balkan gang, and hope that we will produce something. So Roshan, I think that we can now ask President Dzaferovic to take the floor, and I'll be with you. So President, Mr. Dzaferovic, my dear friend Sefik, dragi Sefik, evo da te ja pozdravim na našem jeziku, što kažu hvala ti što si ovdje s nama, i evo ja bih te zamolio da preuzmeš, što kažu, ovdje se kaže da preuzmeš podi, a ti preuzmi ekran sada u naše ime, i hvala ti još jednom za ovo.
Hvala vam lijepo.
Thank you very much.
Da li čujete prijevod?
Can you hear the translation?
Da.
Poštovane dame i gospodo, dragi prijatelji.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends.
Hvala vam na prilici za današnje obraćanje na panelu Jačanje Ujedinjenih nacija, promocija multilateralizma i jačanje uloge Ujedinjenih nacija.
I am thankful for the opportunity to speak today for the panel Strengthening the United Nations, Promoting Multilateralism and Strengthening the Role of the United Nations.
Svjedočimo fundamentalnim promjenama međunarodnih odnosa u kontekstu globalizacije. Nijedna država na svijetu nema privilegiju da se fokusira isključivo na sebe. Sigurnost, stabilnost i prosperitet svake države ovise o sigurnosti, stabilnosti i prosperitetu drugih država, kako u njihovom neposrednom okruženju, tako i na sasvim drugom kraju svijetu.
We are witnessing fundamental changes in the international relations within the context of globalization. No state in the world has the privilege to focus exclusively on itself. Security, stability, and prosperity of every state depends on security, stability, and prosperity of other states, both in their immediate neighborhood as well as at the other end of the world.
Međunarodna saradnja je u ovakvom svijetu nasušna potreba. Globalne probleme, kao što je aktualna pandemija, a koji nadilaze granice država, regija i kontinenata, možemo rješavati samo zajedničkim naporima. U takvom kontekstu multilateralizam i međunarodni poredak zasnovan na opće prihvaćenim pravilima ostaju naša najbolja šansa za put ka mirnoj i sigurnoj budućnosti.
In this kind of a world, international cooperation is a dire necessity. Global issues, such as the current pandemic, that surpass state borders, regions, and continents, can only be solved through joint efforts. In this context, multilateralism and the international order based on the generally accepted rules remain to be our best chance for a road towards a peaceful and safe future.
Multilateralizam je naročito značajan jer svim državama daje pravo učešća u diskusijama i donošenju odluka u vezi sa stvarima koje oblikuju našu zajedničku sudbinu. Učešće u multilateralnim organizacijama i platformama daje značajna prava, ali i velike obaveze državama, doprinoseći na taj način jačanju međunarodne sigurnosti i stabilnosti.
Multilateralism is particularly important for it provides all the states with the right to participate in the discussions and decision-making in matters that shape our common destiny. Participation in multilateral organizations and platforms gives the state significant rights, but also great responsibilities, thus contributing to the strengthening of international security and stability.
Pitanje dijaloga između različitih kultura i religija, utemeljenog na međusobnom uvažavanju i razumijevanju, koje je staro koliko i samo čovječanstvo i danas ostaje suštinski izazov.
The matter of dialogue between different cultures and religions based on mutual appreciation and understanding, which is as old as the mankind itself, remains to be the essential challenge.
Velika globalna utakmica koja traje donosi ozbiljne bojazni. Moramo da upoznajemo i poštujemo jedne druge i da sve probleme prevazilazimo kroz dijalog i upoznavanje drugog i drugačijeg i kroz kvalitetno upravljanje različitostima, poštujući utvrđena pravila i norme koje moraju biti utemeljene na principima morala i pravde.
The great global competition occurring now brings serious fears. We must get to know and respect each other and surpass all the issues through dialogue and getting to know the other and the different through quality management of diversities, respecting the established rules and norms that must be based on the principles of morality and justice.
Šta više, ukoliko na razuman i hrabar način potražimo zajedničke vrijednosti i interese, veze između tradicija i kultura će pokazati sve svoje potencijale.
Furthermore, if we are to seek in a reasonable and a brave manner for common values and interests, the connections between the traditions and the cultures will reveal all of their potential.
Šta je na koncu historija najvećih ljudskih pregnuća nego upravo historija spajanja onog najboljeg iz različitih tradicija i kultura. Vizija u koju vjerujem je vizija susreta, dijaloga, saradnje i uzajamnog uvažavanja.
For what, in the end, is the history of the greatest human achievements, but the history of merging the best from different traditions and cultures? The vision I believe in is a vision of encounters, dialogue, cooperation, and mutual appreciation.
Ove godine smo obilježili 75. godišnjicu od osnivanja Ujedinjenih nacija, koje su formirane nakon Drugog svjetskog rata iz potrebe za očuvanjem globalnog mira i sigurnosti. Istina je da Ujedinjene nacije nisu uvijek uspijevale da u potpunosti odgovore na izazove sa kojima su se suočavale, ali i danas, jednako kao i prije 75 godina, ostaju nezamjenjiva platforma za izgradnju sigurnijeg svijeta.
This year, we have marked the 75th anniversary since the establishment of the United Nations that was formed after the World War II out of a necessity to preserve global peace and security. The truth is that the United Nations wasn't always successful in responding to challenges it was faced with. However, even today, same as 75 years ago, it remains as an irreplaceable platform for the construction of a safer world.
Ujedinjene nacije imaju esencijalan značaj sa svojim aktivnostima na polju ekonomskog razvoja, zaštite ljudskih prava, ravnopravnosti spolova, zaštite okoliša i drugih pitanja. Efektivan rad na ovim poljima na indirektan način daje snažan doprinos izgradnji mira u državama i regijama širom svijeta.
United Nations are of crucial significance with their activities in the field of economic development, human rights protection, gender equality, environment protection, and other matters. Effective work in these fields indirectly provides strong contribution to development of peace in states and regions throughout the world.
U kontekstu multilateralizma i međunarodne saradnje moram istaknuti izuzetno pozitivan značaj koji za Bosnu i Hercegovinu i sve države regiona Zapadnog Balkana ima integracija u Europsku uniju i NATO savez. Ove dvije zajednice koje su postale globalni simboli sigurnosti i prosperiteta imale su izuzetno pozitivan uticaj u proteklim decenijama, te očekujem da će tako biti i u buduće uz intenziviranje procesa euroatlantskih integracija.
Within the context of multilateralism and international cooperation, I must point out the extremely positive significance that the EU and NATO integration process has had for Bosnia and Herzegovina and all of the countries of the Western Balkans. These two associations that became global symbols of security and prosperity had an exceptionally positive influence in the past decade, and I expect that they will continue to do so in the future with the intensification of the Euro-Atlantic integration processes.
Uvjeren sam da će naš region kao stjecište različitih civilizacijskih utjecaja u budućem vremenu svoje različitosti sve više koristiti kao bogatstvo, što one zaista i jesu.
I am convinced that our region, as a confluence of diverse civilization influences, will, in the future, use its diversities much more as its wealth, for that is what they truly are.
Poštovane dame i gospodo, Međunarodni centar Nizami Ganjavi je svojim aktivnostima izgradio prepoznatljivu platformu za promoviranje ideja multilateralne saradnje, međunarodnog poretka zasnovanog na opće prihvaćenim pravilima, te konstruktivnog dijaloga i razmjene između civilizacija i kultura.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, the Nizami Ganjavi International Center has through its activities built a distinguished platform for promoting ideas of international cooperation, international order based on the generally accepted rules, and constructive dialogue and exchange between civilizations and cultures.
Partnerstvo sa predsjednikom Azerbajdžana, gospodinom Ilhamom Alijevom i Međunarodnim centrom Nizami Ganjavi imalo je izuzetno pozitivan efekat za unapređenje naših veza i saradnje, što stvara nove vrijednosti i izuzetno snažne razvojne potencijale za budućnost. Hvala vam na pažnji.
The partnership with the President of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, and the Nizami Ganjavi International Center has had a tremendously positive effect on the improvement of our relations and cooperation, which creates new values and exceptionally strong development potentials for the future. Thank you for your attention.
Hvala, Sefik. Hvala, gospodine predsjedniče. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. And before calling President Nishani to take a floor, I would just add a few things related to what President Dzaferovic just mentioned. President Dzaferovic's connection with NGIC is self-evident for a long time. But at the same time, I want to underline that President Dzaferovic had extremely fruitful cooperation and discussion with President Aliyev, who actually stands behind the project of NGIC in general, and he's our great supporter for the mission of Nizami Ganjavi as being platform for the work and dialogue, the way Nizami Ganjavi philosophy is, about dialogue, about respect, about learning and about understanding. And having that in mind, I just want to remind that President Dzaferovic was among the first persons who spoke on behalf of this country with foreign dignitaries when COVID hit us. And a lot of people know that big players were helping this country, but not so many people know that thanks to the President Dzaferovic and his relation and his call and his appeal to President Aliyev, Azerbaijan was one of the first countries that came in here with very, very concrete support when pandemic was in the very beginning. And of course, at the same time, I want to underline that a long time ago, almost 10 years ago, in Bosnian Parliament was one of the very few parliaments in the region and in Europe who adopted resolution about condemning genocide in Hoxha, a symbolic place in Nagorno-Karabakh, in which was for us very sensitive thing because it reminded us of Srebrenica, genocide in Srebrenica. And at that time, I want to just to recall to attention that President Dzaferovic was one of the key parliamentarians when we were managing together to put people of all three major ethnic groups together to stand in support of people of Azerbaijan for their rights and commemorating the crime that was done a long time ago. And when Nagorno-Karabakh crisis erupted recently, President Dzaferovic, one of the very vocal statesmen from this part of the world, was very clear in standing after support of United Nations resolutions on Nagorno-Karabakh from the perspective of exactly what is topic of our today's gathering. So I just want to remind that President Dzaferovic activities, connections, and exchange of views with President Aliyev are very, very known in this part of our settings. And I want to just say that this is one of the reasons why we from NGIC are very proud and happy that President Dzaferovic is here today with us. And that's the reason why I wanted to mention these things that are of interest that we have to pay attention on. President Nizami, please, could you take a screen? And
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you, Zlatko. I would like to send my best wishes to everybody, to President Dzaferovic and to everybody there and to your families to be well in such difficulty and not so happy times, and hoping now that after vaccine has appeared and has started to distribute, hoping to have a better situation. Thank you very much, Rovjan and NGCI for your invitation and making me part of this web conference. I'm happy and always pleased to talk about such values and principles that is the multilateralism and especially the cohesion and mutual respect, living together, especially in framework of the United Nations organization commitments and the roles. Our region always has been, present in not just in the world stage, but focusing on the United Nations commitments, especially on security issues. By the way, just 2 days ago, my country, Albania, celebrated the 100th anniversary of its membership to the United Nations, the time called League of Nations. And during all these years, Albania, despite the various political and economic processes or developments from where it has passed, has tried to contribute to the strengthening of the dimension of this collective organization. We strongly believe that the proper, standardized and balanced functioning of the United Nations will continue to help greatly in the understanding between countries and nations, as well as in the harmonization of joint actions on facing the challenges that are becoming more and more global challenges. Rightly today, we are focused on multilateralism. Multilateralism today, in my view, is a reality and no longer simply just the dimension of our planet perspective. Undoubtedly that in perspective, this dimension will be further consolidated and can no longer be dissolved. I would like to bring in this dimension in the concrete field, in focusing in our region here in the Balkans. Everybody is aware that there is no country in the Balkans, but even beyond the Balkans. But let's talk about our region. There is no country in the Balkans without national minorities in it. And that means to me the existence of multiculturalism. The wars at the end of the last century in the Balkans proved that the history of mankind cannot be get back even through the wars. And the situation in nowadays, when a kind of good understanding, dialogue, contacts, exchanging, partnership is increased, more stabilized environment, culture is present among us. Offering such possibility for focusing on the better things, such economy, civilization, social developments, and so on. Really having in mind the history and now the experiences, I fully believe that multilateralism and multiculturalism can fully function. Please let me refer very briefly to an example from daily life in my country, Albania. I'm sure that all of you are aware that Albania after the Second World War experienced a terrible dictatorship for 50 years in a row. So repressive was that regime that forbade even the religion belief by law, by constitution at that time, and destroyed all places of the blowing up the churches, the mosques, and so on. After the 90s, when the dictatorship fell in Albania and the country entered a new political system in a democracy, besides the other things, even the cult facilities started also being to be rebuilt. In terms of religion in Albania, there are three religions, communities: Muslim, Orthodox, and Catholic, Roman Catholic. Due to the economic difficulties when Albania started a new political system and lack of infrastructure at that time to restore all the cult objects immediately, in some of the countries in Albania, certain objects of religious rites were started to be used by both the Muslim community and the Catholic community on the rest of the daily, until their own objects were built. Such a tolerance, such an exchange for a common principle and value, such was the belief and optimism and the hope, show us that the people, even belonging to different religion communities, they communicated not just spiritually, respecting each other, but even in the real time, in real places. So I think that although multiculturalism is a reality today, it is still remains challenged. sometimes in my view, I don't believe that the main challenges of the multilateralism, coexistence, and multiculturalism are the nationalism sensitivities or the political platforms of the far right. I think they are outcomes, kind of outcomes. But rejecting the other, ignoring multiculturalism are real challenges. Different speed of the economic developments and the stagnation of civilization, above all, are real sources for those challenges. We have cases of international terrorism or platforms for the annihilation of the others, which stem directly from the stagnation of civilization and lack of accepting the others, lack of economic developments, lack of communication and understanding the reality of our world nowadays. So I believe in the other side that economic development and civilizations are interrelated and influential to each other. In that framework, I believe that United Nations has an important role to play in addressing the challenges that threaten multilateralism as a global reality. I think that the success of the United Nations on that field will depend on the standardization of international practices and treaties achieved by the United Nations, and above all, on the consolidation of the spirit and principle of rule of law. We might have different political, cultural, or social views in our work and daily life and issues. But if we fully respect the principle and the spirit of the rule of law, then I believe that collective mechanisms will be more effective and successful. So on that view and commitments and contribution that Nizami Ganjavi International Center and all excellencies and professors, academics and politicians and diplomats which engaged on that activity really help and create not just a friendly environment and rich environment to learn and to exchange views, but a real contribution. And I'm happy to be part of that. And thank you very much, Zlatko, for having me, and all of you wish all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vlad. I will call now our champion, Nizami Ganjavi International Center, champion of multilateralism and role of in United Nations, the champion among us about need for leadership in changing the world in to be a better place through multilateralism efforts. President Zatlers, I know that you wouldn't say this, but I wanted to say that you are a champion in this field, so please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Zlatko, for nice words. You know, I just remember a little bit more than a year ago, we together with Susan were on the same panel in New York talking about the same topic. And what has changed in that time? We have more experience. We have more experience. We have, you know, we have the fate of the multilateralism is not, let's say, shaped yet. But I always start this topic by saying, you know, we have different examples already existing multilateralism, and it might be regional, and you have that in Southeast Asia, and you have such in the Caribbean Sea, and of course you have in American organizations, you have North American Free Trade Agreement. All these are examples that the nations or the nation states, you know, start to work together and to collaborate. And of course, we have an European Union, to my mind, the best example, but still on its way to true multilateralism, because what is the endpoint, Europe doesn't know yet. The first task, both for the United Nations and for the European Union, was to keep peace. And these tasks have done, you know, we don't have any wars in European Union space. We see that the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council don't attack each other, at least only in words. So this situation has kept for some long time. And if you look at the United Nations as the most multilateral organization with members of more than 200 nation states, let's say everybody wants to be the member of the United Nations, even a small island state. But what we can do as an organization, that's a different question. And the United Nations always attract very good people. Those who work in the United Nations are very, very good people with very good intentions and goals, but sometimes this membership of 200 nations makes this organization very bureaucratic. And also all the institutions, you know, which are, let's say, aside institutions of United Nations, they work as institutions independently. We don't see the global catch of all this global scale. But why it is so? It was the United Nations were created, you know, a long time ago when the situation was absolutely different. And it was a success story. Today, we use the word globalization practically in all our conversations. Those days, nobody knew that word globalization and what does it mean. You know, it is like a fantasy. So does this United Nations organization fit demands of today's world, 21st century world? Of course, a little bit fit, but not 100%. You know, if we could create from the scratch the same type of organization, it would be absolutely different, absolutely different. But the problem is that it's impossible. No nation state has the power, let's say, and capability to create such a new organization. So we had to live within our United Nations and try to really discuss how to improve that. Because nowadays we are much more talking about polarism, that means unipolar world, bipolar world, multipolar world. And I think, you know, if we talk in such terms, you know, it does not bring us much closer to multilateralism, because this is a world about who is going to dominate, who is going to compete. But in the time of globalization, the globalization has created global problems and need global solutions for them. We can't just say one big superpower will solve the global problems. It's impossible. So that's the same question. Do we need global government? It might be the United Nations have to become a global government. And the answer is very clear. No, we don't need global governance because it's impossible to govern from one place. Even in European Union, governing from Brussels is not an easy job, despite the area of European continent is not so big one. That's very easily compared to the federal system of the United States. But this is a question how we learn to collaborate. And I think there are two options. The first option is, of course, global, like Sustainable Development Goals. And they will not be implemented by one central government of the globe. They will be implemented in regions, step by step, with the countries who are neighbors, you know, who understand what they can do together to implement these goals. And the second point comes out of my previous point. We need to implement multilateralism as a principle, as a basic principle of cohabitation regionally, including the Western Balkans. You were talking about Western Balkans. Yes, Western Balkans may become a very good example of multilateralism. And multilateralism always includes a multicultural approach. And multicultural approach, it doesn't mean, you know, to assimilate everybody. It means that everybody keeps happy with his national identity, with his cultural identity. So, and I will end up, not to be very long, that the Nizami Ganjavi Center is also an example of multilateralism. You'll see, we see people from America, we see people from Europe, from Asia, we see sometimes people from China. So we are a global organization, that's just a mini one. I think that we should be an example how to do that. Talk to each other, come closer to the most important goal, that the competition is good, but collaboration is much, much better. I really like some new ideas that they say that about 10% of the global population are cosmopolitan in the good sense of these words. That means that they care about the rest of the world. Still only 10%. Nizami Ganjavi community is a part of these 10%, but it's not enough. We need 50% to make the change. I will end at that point.
Thank you, Valdis. You know very well, I mean, like in the case of your country, Lithuania, that for such a long time, it looked like you were sentenced to the endless being in a system that claimed that it is there forever. But thanks to the small number of people who are committed, who believed in it, one day your dreams became true. So the fact that there is no more than 10% of people who are like-minded gives us hope that we may be a majority in some near future, of course, or whenever people like us becomes majority. That is because we try to do our best when there were not so many of us. Having said so, I would like to ask Susan, my dear friend, Ambassador Elliott. Susan, if you could take the floor and tell us American perspective of how this topic looks from your side when you heard us from the region, and of course from Europe, like Valdis is, and President Nishani and Dzaferovic and myself, we are just simple guys from the region.
Well, thank you, Zlatko, for inviting me to speak today. I'm actually quite honored, and it's difficult to follow 3 former heads of state. So I want to thank you for including me in this discussion. I feel very distinguished to be part of this distinguished panel. And I think this is very timely, and I want to say that I agree with all of the previous speakers, but especially I want to thank President Dzaferovic for his words and for bringing this discussion about multilateralism, together. I would say that, how do I put what's happening in the US? The past 4 years, I think in the United States, we found that people have been examining and looking and putting America first, and America has withdrawn from or has not been as engaged in multilateral efforts. But we are on the verge of a transition, and I believe that the new transition, the new president-elect Biden, has a different point of view and believe that he wants to be engaged not only in multilateral efforts, but in being strong members of the United Nations and other regional organizations like NATO and regional trade organizations. But that said, if many of you follow what you see in the media, our country is divided. There are many people who are questioning, what is the US role? Should we be I'll call us a hegemon. Are we better off? Is the world better off for us being a leader? And I do think that the American people are tired of military conflict, but I would say that, looking at what my friends have just said, I think the average American is very interested in what happens in the world. And, at the NGIC, and I will give Roshan the link to this report, we recently concluded a series of discussions on globalization and really America's role in the world. And, how can globalization work for America and work for the world? And I think, as you've all mentioned, there are many global issues that we can't ignore. And if we do ignore them, like the pandemic, they get worse instead of better. And so I've been actually quite disappointed that in my own country, we haven't taken a role in the global order to try to alleviate the pandemic. And I hope now that we have vaccines being developed and administered, that we will, Europeans, the developed world, the United States, make sure that it's not just Europe and developed countries who receive vaccines, but all countries of the world. But in the report that we had, we looked at the United Nations and other organizations. And I would say, as President Zotler said, the United Nations was formed 75 years ago. We've mentioned that, and it was a different world. There wasn't an idea of globalization, I think, at the time. But the UN is a viable organization, but perhaps one that we need to look at and see how we can work together better to make it a stronger and better organization. I also think if we look at the Balkans, that it's a good example of, you've all shown, cultures, peoples coming together and being, I almost want to say, kind of a crossroads in Europe, because it's an area where many, as we've mentioned, religions, cultural points of view come together. So how can we ensure that the stability of not only the Western Balkans, but Europe and the world is ensured? And obviously the US can't solve all these problems, but one of the things in our discussion the discussion we had was among experts all from the US about what role should the US play in the future. And I was pleased to say, I am pleased to say, and if you read our report, that the idea that the US has to be involved in global not only organizations, but in cooperation among not only larger powers like China, European Union, other organizations, but with smaller regions and countries like the Western Balkans. And Zlatko mentioned that I was involved in Dayton Accord. I was very lowly involved. I just made sure that Secretary Christopher got his briefing papers, but I also went to Sarajevo when he first visited, when war was winding down, and it made me realize the importance of the US being involved in conflicts around the world. So what did we find in our report? Just to tell you a little bit so you can have an idea. I think that the Biden administration is going to be more focused on looking at multilateralism, but we have a lot of issues that we have to deal with at home. So I think that one of the things we recommended is not only looking at how we can be involved in the world, but how can we get the domestic audience in the United States to be more interested in supporting foreign policy? Because having served as a diplomat for almost 30 years, I realized that these relationships that we have aren't just one way, and that we benefit from being involved in not only multilateral organizations, but in regional organizations. And I think for the area of the world that we're talking about, it's really a place where we can look with Europe, EU, NATO, the US and others to be able to come to help the people of the region to decide. So what I'm looking forward to, and this is part of the discussions that Zlatko and I have been putting together about the Western Balkans. We're going to have another one end of January and talk about Serbia and Kosovo and those issues. But what I would like to say is that I think it's important for groups like ours in what I would call a track 2 discussion. People who are not involved in the government, they were formerly involved, but we get together and we make recommendations. And, in a time of transition that and I'm fully hoping that we can share, and I plan to try to share with the new administration some of the recommendations that we will come up with, Nizami Ganjavi as a group. And I hope that within your respective countries, if you have ideas and things that you want to share, I think this now is the time, especially in the US, it's a transition, but also in Europe, with Brexit and other things going on, and then with discussions about who will join the European Union. I think it's an extremely important time for us to share ideas and to come up with recommendations that will help strengthen not only multilateralism, but our cooperation around the world. So I think I'll leave it at that, and I'll make sure that Rafshan gets you a copy of our report, because it's much more detailed in talking about how we can, because our conclusions were that the US should be engaged, but we need to look at perhaps the way we engaged at the end of the 20th century and beginning of the 21st century needs to be re-examined. And how can we more effectively engage so that we can, maybe we can't avoid pandemics and things in the future, but we can be better prepared to work together to face the challenges that we all face, like climate change, global warming, pandemics. And the other thing I think we need to look at is the world economy. The pandemic has affected all of us, and we need to look for ways that we can work together to improve and strengthen our economy. So I'll leave it at that, and but I'm happy to have more discussion. And thank you again, Zlatko, for inviting me to be part of this very esteemed group of former leaders of heads of state.
Thank you, Susan, so much for your kind and valuable words. And of course, I'm sure that everyone who didn't see that report is looking forward to see a little bit more in detail what you are talking about. Of course, since you and Roshan, of course, but Sefik, you three of you are not among us former presidents or prime ministers. Sefik is in a good way, to become one day. So hopefully that he will, in a good health, happen to be that, because we know that maybe one of the best things of being president or prime minister is that one day you can be the former one. And that's the title that you can use very, very good by sharing your thoughts and your experience with people that are sitting in an office now. And I'm sure that everyone who was former head of state of government does not envy so much, especially in such a tough time like today is for my country, from this region, and sitting on top of the world. This is not called being lucky to be sitting there, but here we are. And as Valdis said, we have to try to be majority as us, as alliance of like-minded people who see the future of the world together. And now the third continent is jumping in. Abdulaziz, I hope that you are with us.
Yes, I am with you. I am enjoying this beautiful discussion. Sir, first of all, I am very honored to be part of this distinguished panel with these important personalities. And I thank Nizami Ganjavi International Center and my dear friend, Rofshan Muradov, the Secretary General. And I thank you, Mr. Zlatko, my dear friend and brother. Well, I am in Rabat, as you know, and this is part of the, scene now in the world. You can see the world is moving so rapidly in many ways. But we, as members of this global village, inhabitants of this global village, we cannot leave multilateralism away. It is a necessity. It is something that we have to hold to. The world needs multilateral cooperation in many ways. The world is facing terrorism, extremism, migration, trafficking of people and trafficking of narcotics. Now Corona, with its heavy ramifications on all the people all over the world, these issues and many other issues need multilateral cooperation to find solutions and bring people to safety. And there is no other institution that can do that other than the United Nations. The United Nations is weak, is unable to do something here and there. This is a reality we have to confess. But it can be helped and strengthened to perform its duty in a better way. I know that all the Secretaries General of the United Nations, starting from Boutros-Ghali and Kofi Annan, and now Ban Ki-moon, and now our friend Guterres, they all started some way in the process of reforming the United Nations, and they proposed many good ideas to improve the functioning of the United Nations and its different agencies that are scattered in many continents, but they were not helped by the members of the United Nations, or the majority of the powerful members of the United Nations. And I was really very delighted to hear this very optimistic tune from our dear friend Mrs. Elliott, who said that now we are in a transition period in the United States where a president is leaving and a president-elect is coming with different ideas and with different concerns. And one of them is to go back, to be influential in the multilateral action of the world, in the United Nations and all the other institutions and organizations, and also to have the United States, whom we knew for a long time as a very strong force in helping stabilizing the world and fighting all the aggression that happens here and there. And the withdrawal of the United States during the past 4 years really weakened this role and also spread some pessimism in the minds and the hearts of many people all over the world. So multilateralism is a necessity. We need it. We can reform it. We can make it more functional if we commit ourselves, all the nations, to it. And the regional or national gatherings will not substitute multilateralism. They can be complementary to it. And the European Union, the African Union, the ASEAN, the Islamic Cooperation Organization, the Arab League, and you name it. There are many different gatherings in the world, but they are not a substitute to the multilateralism idea and institutions. They can complement, they can help, and they can do something here and there that strengthen the role of the United Nations. But the most important institution is the United Nations. And if we leave the United Nations to suffer from reorganizing itself and strengthening the mechanisms and the way of functioning that the United Nations should have to tackle the problems of the world and to bring solutions and to suggest ideas and innovative proposals that can help in solving many problems in the world. If we leave the United Nations like that, then we will be left in a jungle. You know, the powerful will overcome the weak, and nobody will find a legal framework, an umbrella that covers its security and safety in the world. So this is how I look at it. And I think all the previous speakers, their excellencies, President Dzaferovic and President Nizami, President Zoltan, and Mrs. They all, and you also in the introduction, they all tackled this and stressed the importance of multilateralism and the need of putting it on the right track and giving it all the means to make its job successful. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Abdulaziz. I mean, with listening all these remarks and brilliant thoughts from President Dzaferovic and later on to all of you, before giving the screen to my dear friend, our champion of multilateralism, President Zatlers. I mean, the common denominator of all these discussions is something which I could only paraphrase Churchill talking about democracy. That's not the perfect system, but nothing else better has been invented so far. So it looks like that can be applicable to United Nations and today's multilateralism, especially United Nations. They're definitely far from the perfect, but nothing else has been invented yet so far. And just like for democracy, you have to build up. This is a process that you have to build up and work on it. And like we have expression here, like British English grass, you just slow mow it and put the water, mow it, put the water, and after 100 or 200 years, it will start sticking to the ground. So with those thoughts, I would appreciate, Babalis, if you could now take the floor and to present our award to President Dzaferovic.
Poštovane dame i gospodo, hvala vam na diskusijama nakon mog uvodnog izlaganja koje se ticalo jačanja Ujedinjenih naroda, nacija, promocija multilateralizma i jačanje uloge Ujedinjenih nacija.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your discussion after my initial address, speaking about multilateralism and how to strengthen the United Nations.
Dakle, u svim diskusijama ja sam čuo, po mom mišljenju, vrlo iskrena i vrlo zrela promišljanja vezana za šta treba da uradimo kako bi svijet sutra bio bolji.
In all of the discussions, I heard very honest and very mature thoughts on what we should do in the future to make the world better.
Naš zadatak je da učinimo svi, dakle i pojedinci i države i multilateralne organizacije, da svijet sutra bude bolji, da svijet sutra bude pravedniji i da svijet sutra bolje živi. Svakog narednog dana bolje nego prethodnog.
Our job as individuals, as heads of as states, as multilateral organizations, is to do everything in our power to make the world better and more just and to help us live better lives in the future.
Mi nemamo ništa bolje, ili bar dosadašnji svijet izmislio ništa bolje kako bi unaprijedio mehanizme saradnje. Slažemo se da moramo sarađivati, da trebamo sarađivati, ići u susret jedni drugima, pomagati jedni drugima. Dakle, da ne postoji ništa bolje nego što su Ujedinjene nacije i druge multilateralne organizacije koje su proizašle iz Ujedinjenih nacija. Trebamo tražiti načina kako da ih unaprijedimo.
So far, we have nothing better than mechanisms already created by the UN and other multilateral organizations to help us put these ideas forward and make the world a better place.
Vidite, ja govorim iz Sarajeva, govorim iz Bosne i Hercegovine, jedne male, ali vrlo važne i vrlo značajne svjetske države, vrlo značajne zbog njene paradigme, njenog multietničkog karaktera, zbog kataklizme koju smo preživjeli od 1992. do 1995. godine u agresiji na Bosnu i Hercegovinu, zbog masovnih zločina, nasilja nad etničkom strukturom, što je na kraju završilo genocidom u Srebrenici.
I speak from Sarajevo, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is a very small but yet very significant state due to the paradigm and the history that happened here. We had a very terrible cataclysm. We had violence and wars, and in the end, it resulted in a genocide in Srebrenica.
I ja vam, dakle, sasvim sigurno mogu da kažem da, recimo, da nije bilo ove multilateralne akcije, da nije bilo aktivnosti NATO-a, Ujedinjenih nacija, Sjedinjenih Američkih Država kao lidera u svemu tome, pitanje kako bi se sve to okončalo u periodu od 1992. do 1995. godine ovdje u Bosni i Hercegovini.
And I can say surely that had there not been interventions from organizations such as NATO, UN, or United States, it is really a great question of how things would end here after the cataclysmic events from 1992 to 1995.
Akcijom Ujedinjenih nacija, na primjer, formiran je Haški krivični tribunal koji je presudio brojne zločince. I ja mislim da je to poruka za budućnost, da trebamo, recimo, da jačamo Međunarodni krivični sud, koji bi bio poruka kao multilateralna organizacija koju su formirale Ujedinjene nacije za cijeli svijet.
One action of the United Nations was the formation of the Hague Tribunal, which has sentenced many criminals. So we should strengthen such initiatives such as International Criminal Court, which would serve similar purpose in the future.
To je samo jedan primjer na osnovu kojeg ja sasvim jasno dokazujem što znači multilateralna organizacija u svjetskom poretku.
This is just one example that proves what a multilateral organization can mean in a world order.
Dakle, današnji svijet mora da funkcionira po pravilima.
Today's world needs to function according to the rules.
Pravila trebaju da budu utemeljena na moralu i na pravdi.
The rules need to be based on morality and justice.
I moraju postojati multilateralni mehanizmi za sprovođenje toga.
And there must be multilateral mechanisms to implement this.
Genocid u Srebrenici je izvršen zato što nisu upotrijebljeni mehanizmi koje su Ujedinjene nacije mogle da upotrijebe i genocid se mogao izbjeći da su upotrijebljeni mehanizmi Ujedinjenih nacija.
The genocide in Srebrenica happened because the mechanisms UN already had were not put in use. Had they been done so, then the genocide in Srebrenica would not have happened.
To su priznali Ujedinjene nacije i jasno je kazano od strane Ujedinjenih nacija da je to ljaga koju Ujedinjene nacije nikada neće moći sprati sa sebe.
United Nations admitted this to be so, and they said that this is a stain that they will never be able to wash off themselves.
Dakle, zaključno, ja mislim da je budućnost svijeta u saradnji, u jedinstvu različitosti, u međusobnom upoznavanju, u uspostavi i jačanju multilateralnih organizacija na čelu sa Ujedinjenim nacijama i jasnim pravilima utemeljenim na moralu i pravdi, što se na kraju pretače u međunarodno pravo. Ja mislim da je to budućnost svijeta.
In conclusion, I believe that the future of the world is in meeting each other, having cooperation, establishing all the rules that are based on morality and justice, and we need each other in order to progress in the future.
Nisam nimalo naivan i znam da je današnje stanje daleko od ovoga o čemu ja govorim.
I am not naive. I know that the situation today is a lot worse than what I'm saying right now.
Ali to nam ne daje za pravo da budemo inertni, da stvari posmatramo. Moramo da težimo ovim idealima.
But we must not be inert. We must strive for better ideals.
I svakoga dana moramo učiniti nešto kako bismo ove ideale pretvorili u stvarnost.
And every day we must do something to make these ideals a reality.
Danas nam je to lakše raditi nego prije 75 godina.
And today it's easier for us to do so than it was 75 years ago.
Savremene tehnologije, načini komuniciranja su danas tako uznapredovali da mi za nekoliko sekundi možemo da budemo s jedne tačke svijeta na drugoj tački svijeta. Vidite, mi danas iz cijelog svijeta smo se ovdje okupili i držimo konferenciju, vidimo jedni druge, a ja se nisam pomjerio iz Sarajeva kao ni vi iz vaših mjesta u kojima se sada nalazite i međusobno vodimo dijalog.
Modern technologies and ways of communication have been improved significantly since that time. One of the examples is the meeting that we are having today. As you can see, I'm sitting in my office. I have not moved from Sarajevo, neither have you moved from your respective countries. And yet we are all together here gathered and having this fruitful discussion.
I na kraju, dozvolite mi da kažem da sam ja u centru Nizami Ganjavi prepoznao organizaciju koja stremi ovom o čemu ja govorim.
And in the end, allow me to say that in the center, Nizami Ganjavi, I have recognized an organization that is striving to achieve these goals.
I da daje značajan doprinos ovim stremljenjima.
And is giving a wonderful contribution to achieving these goals.
Zbog toga svim srcem učestvujem odazivam se na svaki poziv centra Nizami Ganjavi i sa zadovoljstvom sam održao govor na prošlom Baku forumu 2019. godine, 2020. godine, nažalost, zbog pandemije nismo mogli da imamo forum.
That is why I really try my best to participate in all of the activities of the Nizami Ganjavi Center, and I will always, with my full heart, participate. I have already answered the calls to be at the plenary session of the Baku Forum in 2019. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we weren't able to have this meeting in 2020.
Svoje političke stavove, a to očekujem od svih ljudi koji se nalaze u aktualnim stolicama, odgovornih ljudi. Moja stolica je sada odgovorna pozicija za koju ja znam da nije vječna, da traje još izvjesno vrijeme i da će neko drugi doći u ovu stolicu. Gospodine Lagundžija, vi ste o tome govorili, jel? Sve teče, sve se mijenja.
And when it comes to my political views, I believe that all people in responsible positions should do their best at the time. I will not be in this chair forever. I know that this is very responsible position that I'm obtaining, but Mr. Lagundžija has already spoken about this, and everything is changing. People are always exchanging each other in these positions.
Ali, dakle, iz ove pozicije odgovornosti, kada zauzimam stavove o događajima, konkretnim događajima diljem svijeta, rukovodim s ovim principima.
But from these responsible positions, when I'm taking my position on specific events in the world, then this is what I have in mind.
To me je između ostalog naučila i situacija u mojoj zemlji, prošlost moje zemlje.
I am guided by the principles I've already spoke about, and the history of my country has taught me to do so.
A to je da svijet treba da se gradi u principu jedinstva različitosti, jedinstva u različitostima.
The world needs to be built in the unity of diversities.
Da u svijetu moral i pravda treba da budu temelji međunarodnog prava.
In the world, morality and justice need to be the base of the international law.
I ako tako postupate, onda vam neće biti teško zauzeti stav o bilo kojem konkretnom pitanju.
And if you act in this way, it will not be hard for you to take a stand on any issue.
Ja uopće nisam imao dilema kada sam zauzimao konkretan stav o teritorijalnoj cjelovitosti Azerbajdžana, o zločinu u Hodžali, o rješavanju tog pitanja i bez ikakvih dilema sam iznosio svoje stavove.
Therefore, I had no dilemma when it came to expressing my views on the preserving territorial integrity of Azerbaijan or the crime that happened in Hodžala.
I sve što sam govorio tada odraz je zapravo poštivanja i rukovođenja ovim principima o kojima ja govorim.
And everything I said at the time was based on the principles I have already mentioned.
Dozvolite mi da se zahvalim na priznanju koje mi dodjeljujete.
Allow me to thank you for the recognitions you are awarding me right now.
To jeste priznanje za mene.
This is a great recognition for me.
Ali iznad toga to je priznanje za moju zemlju.
But above that, this is a recognition for my country.
Za moju državu, Bosnu i Hercegovinu.
For my state, Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Jer ja nastupam iz stolice jednog od članova kolektivnog šefa bosansko-hercegovačke države.
because I speak to you as a chair on behalf of the collective head of state, as one of the members of the presidency.
I to je priznanje ovim principima o kojima sam ja govorio, na kojima treba da bude utemeljen svijet. Hvala vam na pažnji.
And that is the recognition of the principles I was talking about, the world that the world needs to be based upon. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your kind words. And of course, Susan, I want to just take a note, and I want to I'm very glad that George and John, Mr. Schwab and Mr. Connorton are here with us. And I'm sure that, Susan, this is also going to be very helpful discussion that will give us some advantage to be a little bit more aware of the issues that our common work is about the future of Western Balkan. And we opened this as a tribute to multilateralism, a tribute to President Dzaferovic. But I think that his words that we're putting the human rights, justice, rule of law, and as in a very core of the future, not only of this region, but the future of multilateralism is also going to be very helpful in our next discussions, and hopefully our next guidelines is that we think that should be used in the future by real decision makers. So in that context, I would like to call our Secretary General, Roshan Muradov, to take a screen and present our recognition to President Dzaferovic, recognition by Nizami Ganjavi International Center for what he's been doing so far with us, hoping that this is just maybe the halfway of our common journey to keep walking and talking what we are thinking, but walking along the path to more free, more human rights, justice, rule of law based states, our region, our country, and the rest of the world. So Roshan, with having said so, I would like to ask you to address.
Prime Minister. Your Excellency, dear everyone, it's the first one. This one is to Your Excellency, but we have a new tradition that for having equality, we are also giving for the spouses, like, to have, like, everyone to have a present from the NGIC. It's a gold made, and this from the new occupied territories, like, free-landed territories, Shusha, which is called Kharabilbil, which is the most famous, like, flower in Azerbaijan. And this ones is coming with that medals. And we are so much grateful for the contribution and for the involvement of Bosnia and Herzegovina to the partnership with NGIC, because as we've been talking recently, and a couple hours ago with Zlatko and Dr. Ismail, that Western Balkans is playing a crucial role in the NGIC and also in the partnership with Azerbaijan. But we are so blessed to have your support, Mr. President. I remember the visit of Ms. Kerry Kennedy, that we visited your office, Your Excellency, and she gave you her father's paintings and so on. That was really very emotional moments, and we really admire you, and we're so much grateful for your support.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you once again for being with us today, and hope this is just the new beginning of our long journey to a much better world, post-COVID era that we are all looking for, and that you all talk us, and as President Dzaferovic said, I mean, Bosnia and Herzegovina, maybe we who are from here, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, sometimes we are too partial, maybe not so objective, but it looks like we happen to be symbol of something which is much bigger than ourselves. And that's the reason why we are very thankful to all friends that are gathering in here today, and the close circle of NGIC that is with us. And as sometimes we like to say, that we are really happy to be family, the same family of like-minded people who share the same values of better world based on human rights, justice, and rule of law, based on a philosophy and principles that great Nizami Ganjavi was teaching us, not knowing that one day we will really take it so strongly, they will need it so strongly, which is dialogue, respect, learning, and mutual understanding as a fundaments of any substantial progress and better world. So thank you very much. And President Dzaferovic, once again, Susan, Valdis, of course, Abdulaziz, Poet, and our dear friends from NCFP, John and George. I salute you and thank you so much again. And looking forward to see you in the next.
Hopefully in person. Hopefully in person we can see each other soon.
So when we have chance to do this, Susan, we will definitely present this to President Dzaferovic in person. And I hope that in spring, when we come, when the conditions allow us and we do our regional gathering in our project, one of our events that we hope we will do on site, that we will be maybe using that opportunity to extend this discussion, and maybe Rovshan will be able to present this to President Dzaferovic in person.
Well, and thank you, President Dzaferovic, for the support of your government. It's extremely important not only to have former but current officials participating in our events. And so congratulations from cold and snowy New York. And Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Congratulations, and thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, and see you very soon.
Thank you.